Well, Rand wants your hand because Kentucky Senator Rand Paul is leading a charge, urging millions of Americans to join him in a lawsuit against no less than the Obama administration over all of these NSA leaks. And today he is taking his case here and only here. Welcome, everyone. Glad to have you. I'm Neil Cavuto, and the ACLU just broke the ice. And now these follow-up lawsuits stand to break the record books, including a class action doozy accusing 9 tech companies of giving the NSA direct access to their servers and their users' private data. To Fox Business Network's Rich Edson on the growing and expanding legal fallout. Rich.
Neil, a pair of lawsuits asking for more than $20 billion in damages, naming major tech companies like Google, Facebook, Verizon, and others, along with the Attorney General, the Director of the National Security Agency, and President Barack Obama. Larry Klayman, the founder of Judicial Watch, part of the suit here of the government's tracking of phone records and the NSA's PRISM program, the reported gathering of information directly from Internet servers. The lawsuit says such broad and intrusive PRISM collections directly violate the U.S. Constitution and also federal laws, including but not limited to the outrageous breach of privacy, freedom of speech, freedom of association, and the due process rights of American citizens. And one privacy analyst says the revelation of these programs could lead to even more lawsuits.
But if I am the target of a wiretap and that can be established and something happened to me, I think the law should be that we can sue. We're going to have plaintiffs trying those theories, and we'll see if the courts are a little more open to it now that they see the scope of the surveillance.
This all started when Edward Snowden, the former federal security contractor in Hawaii, leaked details of these programs to The Guardian and Washington Post. Now another newspaper says it's spoken with Snowden, the South China Morning Post. Snowden tells the paper he's in Hong Kong and says, "My intention is to ask the courts and people of Hong Kong to decide my fate." He goes on to say he would rather fight the United States government in the courts there because he has faith in Hong Kong's rule of law. Neil?
Rich Edson, thank you very much. Now to Kentucky Republican Senator Rand Paul preparing a legal case himself, and this one could be big, very, very big. The senator joins me now. Senator, what are you up to here?
Well, you know, we're asking people who've been affected by this spying if they want to sue the government and say, you know what, this is unconstitutional. And since everyone's phone records were spied upon, I would guess that that includes millions and millions of people. We know Verizon was included, but there's also evidence that AT&T was complicit as well. So what we're saying is that the government has no right through a single warrant to search everyone's records. The government does have a right under the Fourth Amendment. If you are accused of a crime and there's probable cause, they can go after you. And if your phone records lead to other people, they can get warrants to go after them. That's good police work. But looking at everybody's phone's records, I think really goes against what we stand for as a free people.
What if they're not looking at the records? They argue, as the NSA chief was saying, just collecting the material. No one's done anything with it yet. You say the danger alone that they could and would is enough.
Well, I guess my problem is they say just trust us, but you know, since the IRS is targeting different individuals, I have lost my degree of trust with them. I also am losing some trust since the intelligence director came before a Senate committee in March of this year and basically lied to us. He said they weren't collecting any of the data, and it turns out not only are they collecting it, they're collecting all collected. There is a danger that phone calls could ultimately be used through this type of collection to track your movements, because basically your cell phone is nothing more than a GPS transponder as well.
You know, Senator, a lot of this predates your arrival in Washington, but the administration argued that senators who were expressing surprise at this knew better, that they knew that this was going on. Did you?
Well, I haven't expressed surprise, just outrage. I last year was in Las Vegas and have had to hear, I have had classified briefings on this, but I wasn't allowed to talk about it in specifics. So last year in Las Vegas, about a year ago, I said they're looking at a gazillion, because I can't tell you the real number because that would be in my classified briefing. But I really literally said that last year they're looking at a gazillion phone calls, and I have been objecting to this all along. I object to the whole principle of that my third-party records that I give to a bank or to a phone company or to the Visa card company, that is private. And in fact, I signed an agreement with most of these people. They're supposed to defend my privacy, but then the government comes in and gives them immunity. So these lawsuits against these companies will probably fail because Congress actually gave immunity to most of these companies.
Then where, sir, do you draw the line? When you were with me not too long ago, you did see now and then the use, for example, of drones to go after bad guys, and did find some caveats there where you would consider that. But here, even leaving the gate, the phone records just piling up on a bureaucrat's desk, you do draw the line. Why?
Well, what I say is no matter what type of technology you're using, you have to obey the Bill of Rights. So the Bill of Rights says you can go after an individual person, place, item, papers, but it doesn't say you can go after 300 million people with one warrant. And this is the horrifying aspect of this, is because the government's been misleading us and saying, oh, we've only had 20 orders or 50 court warrants this year, so it's not a big deal. But if each warrant applies to 1 billion phone records a day, that's a lot of information. And at the very least, the American public needs to know, are you in favor of and will you vote for congressmen and senators who have such a casual disregard for your privacy?
All right, so, you know, the argument always, Senator, is that we're one terror incident away from people forgetting this debate, free speech and everything else, that they'd sooner be wanting to protect themselves than get in the way of the government not being able to do that. You say what?
Well, I say even with this surveillance state where they're looking at 1 billion phone calls a day, the Boston bombing still occurred,
right?
The underwear bomber still occurred. And in those cases, I would say that actually maybe we're distracted by too much information, because the Boston bomber, we were warned about him, and he went back to Chechnya, and nobody knew he'd flown back to Chechnya. The underwear bomber was warned about to us by his father, who reported him, and we didn't do enough to stop him from coming in here with a bomb. We were lucky because the passengers actually stopped him. So I would say we don't have to give up our freedom to have security. I think you can have both. My suspicion is that even the people who they say they got through this system, really they got through good old-fashioned police work, because the one guy they're talking about, Cezaz, who had to do with this subway bombing, they nabbed his co-conspirator 3 months beforehand,
right.
Through normal processes.
Through normal channels, not any of these things.
My guess is Nasir was making phone calls to Cezaz. That's how they got Cezaz, and not through some sort of random linking of phone calls.
And apparently not through Verizon, I might add. Let me ask you this, though, Senator. Your father created a bit of a stir when he talked about the 29-year-old leaker in this whole NSA drama, saying that he wouldn't be surprised, and I don't think he was being entirely facetious, if we had a drone go after him. What did you think of that? And do you think that is a genuine fear that the government might try to take him out?
You know, I think that would not be something that I would think would happen. I think that there's a chance they could extradite him, and I think there's a chance they may well have already started proceedings to try to bring him home.
But if we couldn't extradite him, would there be justification in trying to kill him?
No, and I think if anything like that happened, obviously there'd be hue and cry from top to bottom throughout our country. I don't see them doing that, but there was a story online where people were overheard in an airport saying they ought to make him disappear. That sounds like gossip.
Well, do you think this guy is, how do you look at this guy? As a hero, as a villain? Where do you stand?
Well, I would say that when people commit civil disobedience, they're doing something a lot of times because they think no one's listening, they're at wit's end, and he felt like basically the director of intelligence had lied. So really you have two individuals that history will judge. One, an intelligence director who blatantly lied to the Senate and said he wasn't collecting any data when in fact he was collecting billions of pieces of data every day on Americans. And then another gentleman who was obligated not to leak secret documents, but felt like the country was lying to the people about a program, and he thought it was going against the grain of the Constitution, and at great peril to himself, maybe not physical, but he's gone into exile, may never be able to return without being incarcerated. You know, I think history will judge whether he's a hero or a villain.
Because a lot of people say whether his intentions were heroic or not by running to Hong Kong, essentially to China, that's not heroic. You say what?
You know, I think everybody will make their own judgment. I think choosing exile is hard for anyone,
right.
And risking imprisonment, long-term imprisonment. You know, the thing is really we should be asking the question about, is the director of intelligence a hero or a villain for lying to Congress, for hiding a massive program that is looking at every American cell phone data every day?
When are you going to file this suit, Senator?
We're going to have a press conference tomorrow. There'll be, I believe, 86 different groups that are involved and interested in privacy, the Bill of Rights, the Fourth Amendment. There may be several different lawsuits, but what we're asking people is if they want to be part of this lawsuit is to go to randpac.com. On that website, they can give us their permission to become part of the lawsuit. And I think if millions of people were to get interested and say, you know what, there are limits. I want them to get terrorists, I want them to get criminals, I want them to get bad guys, but I also want some semblance of privacy. If millions of people turned out and said that, I think all of a sudden we could get a change in the direction of the country.
And just to be clear, because I'm no lawyer, who are you suing?
It would have to be the government's position on this, trying to overturn.
But would it be the White House? I understand the government's position, but would it target the White House, the president? Who?
Well, it would have to be the FISA court order that gave permission to do this. So they've gone by what they think the law is. It would be us saying
so it's really
that
the Justice Department. You're suing the Justice Department.
Well, it's the constitutionality. We're suing over the constitutionality of these orders.
All right. Senator, thank you very much. We'll be watching very closely.
Thank you, Neil.
Rand Paul. Well, it's not just the president being sued. He's got company, or should I say companies. And by the way, not just companies. Try an angry mom and dad who are suing on behalf of their son. This young man killed in Afghanistan. They're about to give this administration the business, and their lawyer is stopping by Fox Business to spell it all out on Fox Business, only Fox Business, tonight. These folks, their suit, this lawyer, one word, stunning.